Hello, everyone, and welcome to the OnlyLandFans show. My name is Kendall Lejeune, and our guest today is Jaren Barnes. Jaren Barnes and his wife, Asiya, are the driving force behind the Land Mavericks Society, a rapidly growing land flipping mastermind group. Jaren's impressive career in real estate includes collaborations with some of the industry's top names, such as BiggerPockets.com, Simple Wholesaling, and RETipster.com, where he gained extensive experience and knowledge. During his time at Simple Wholesaling, Jaren successfully sold between 25 to 30 properties per month. At RETipster.com, he shared his expertise on the best practices for flipping vacant properties, educating tens of thousands of people. Jaren has also hosted numerous podcasts and interviewed hundreds of experts in the field of real estate. Jaren, thanks so much for joining us. How are you today?
I'm good, man. Blushing a little bit. That was a little awkward to sit there and listen to that, but hey, appreciate the honor of being here, man. It's truly an honor.
Absolutely. Well, it's an honor to have you on. I know that since we started this podcast, I had so many people suggest, hey, when are you going to have Jaren on? So I'm so excited to finally have you on. The first thing that I'd love to get started is a little bit about your background. Can you tell us how did you get started in doing land deals?
Yeah, so I was working for a house wholesaler. The company was called Simple Wholesaling. I worked for a guy named Brett Snodgrass, and I thought that I was going to be working for him pretty much for like the next 10, 20 years of my life. And I had no ambitions of like building my own company or doing my own thing, but I wanted to make more money and have more control of kind of my assets. I was making really good money there, but I wanted to just be able to use my skill set and leverage that somehow. Land was very similar to wholesaling houses. There are some slight differences, like the bottlenecks are a bit reversed. It's harder to find properties in houses, easier to sell them, and vice versa. It's the opposite in land. So it's easier to get deals, harder to sell them, right? Those type of things. But I figured I could use that skill set that I had as a wholesaler and do deals that would never be in direct competition to my boss that I wanted to run with. So that's how I got started. I actually got started doing deals with him. We were running a podcast. I think he's still doing the podcast. I think it's evolved into the Iron Deep or Brett Snodgrass experience or something, but it was called the Simple Wholesaling Podcast, and I was the co-host there. And we interviewed not Jack. We interviewed Mark Podolsky, Milan Geek, and then Jack Bosch. Jack Bosch, funny enough, actually came to Indianapolis, and I like drove him around all day, like showing him houses because he was like gonna like buy property. And then we interviewed Seth, and I knew Seth because I used to work for Bigger Pockets for like a nano-minute back in like 2014, before they like blew up and like grew their team and stuff. And Seth was like a blog contributor and stuff, and we were in a mastermind together. So I ended up kind of driving with Seth the most. We interviewed him on the podcast. And so I kind of dived into the RETipster camp, and kind of in exchange for giving a lot of constructive criticism and critique to the RETipster masterclass, which is now, it used to be called the RETipster club, but it's now called the RETipster masterclass. I was able to walk through that for free, and then got a lot of education, and then partnered with my employer at the time. And within the first 3 deals, we landed kind of a once in a lifetime awesome deal where the stars aligned, and there was a timber company that could double close. And so like he ended up walking away with like $98,000, my boss did, and I walked away personally with like 38,000. And it was like this awesome deal. And I was like, I think deal number 3 was somewhere around there.
Wow.
Yeah, it was. And then I was off to the races from there.
Nice. And so what types of land deals do you specialize in? Do you have a particular bread and butter type deal?
Yeah, these days for sure. So I specialize in what Travis King has popularized as the blue ocean strategy. So for those who might not be familiar, I would probably distinguish it as north of 30,000 market value. So most people that are doing deals when they get started, they don't have the capital to buy deals at say 50,000 or 100,000, but that's where there's the most amount of leverage. So that's what we specialize in. And that's actually what we teach at Land Maverick Society, is how to specialize using land specialized real estate agents. And I mean, my favorite deals are like the buy around 100, list at 200. So that's
Nice.
some of the stuff we go after.
Very good. And so you mentioned that you had a once in a lifetime timber deal, but what's the largest land deal you've ever done?
Drew would probably know better than me. So yeah, what have we done recently that's like really epic? That'd make me look really good.
Well, I've only been with you for 8 months. We just had a subdivide deal fall through. That would have been a buy for 360, exit at 800. And we got outbid by we don't know if we don't think they're going to subdivide it. We think it's just a buy and hold investment hedge fund, but they were just willing to pay a lot more than us. But we've got we've got a few in the pipeline. We got a buy for 130, list at 260.
Yeah.
Nice.
Probably the first one Jaren and I did together, it was buy at 84. I don't know what we sold that one at, Jaren, because I just know what my cut was.
Sold in like a month too.
Yeah.
There's some interesting backstory on that. It's a funny story.
Let's hear it.
Well, not to get into details, and I'll just say there were two prominent land funders that I ran that deal through that both turned me away, saying that the deal was too risky, and my back was against the wall. And it's really funny because I didn't even know Drew at the time. I actually didn't even talk to him for like a month and a half after this whole interaction happened. But our backs were against the wall. We were like, I think 10 days extended after the closing date. And they were like, how are we going to get this thing funded? And our mutual friend, Ajay, I called him like, bro, I'm desperate. I need help. Help me. And he's like, I got you. Let me make some calls. And so Drew apparently was in the desert because he's a major in the U.S. Army Reserve. And he was like doing Army stuff. And he's like, he didn't even know how much money was in his account. The wire amount was like 84,000 and he had like 85,000 in his account. But he didn't even talk to me or my wife. He was just like, yep, I know Jaren, let's do it. and then wired it. And then we sold it in like a month and a half. So all the people that were like, crapping on the deal, it's like, well, we sold it very quickly, sir.
Nice.
Or ma'am, whoever these funders may be.
That's awesome. So what types of deals did you focus on when you first got started? Like your very first few deals, what were those like?
Yeah, so I'm an 80-20 guy. So there's a book here, 80-20 Sales and Marketing by Perry Marshall. That's like probably, I could only give one book out to the entire world. That's probably what it would be. So even back in the day, I always looked for ways that I could be in a highly leveraged position. Right. So when I first got started, most people were like buying stuff on terms and doing stuff like 500 to say 2,500 range. And I just intentionally went over after more expensive stuff to be, again, in kind of a blue ocean, a quieter, less competitive space. So I, for a long time, probably for the first 2 to 3 years of my land business, was buying between 5 and 15,000 and playing in that sandbox. But I've always used land specialization. Well, predominantly, once I figured out what I was doing, I always use land specialized agents.
Very nice. Very nice. And so, what were the biggest challenges for you when you first got started?
So I think my challenges were a bit unique to most people. So I want to answer that question in a way that I think would be more helpful to the audience. But to answer it point blank in both regards, I was coming off of a company that had a budget for marketing and almost to some degree an unlimited budget for experimentation and building out websites, and they could waste money and it'd be fine. Like every month, because we were buying and selling so much, we actually lost money routinely every single month on a couple of deals. And then so I took that same level of like spendability, and when I first got started, just grew way too quickly. My wife will tell you cringe stories of when I hired a guy that wasn't even like a good fit, had no personality data matching, just like a guy from church that I wanted to help out. And like, it was a mess. It was terrible. And yeah, so that was probably my biggest lesson personally. But I think probably the biggest issue for most people getting started is having the confidence around comps, because the thing that makes us land investors, I think our unique selling proposition, our core skill set is analyzing deals and running comps, because it's a very nuanced skill. It's always a mix of an art and a science to run comps, but in land, it's more art than it is science. It's really developing a skill and a feel for things. So if you could focus on anything, that's what I would get the reps in. Really, at the end of the day, your land business boils down to offers. If you can optimize for how many offers you're getting out, that's what's going to lead to more deals. So if you can, how do you get to more offers? You analyze more deals. So
Got it. So let's jump right into that, because I think that there's a lot of meat on the bone to chat about when it comes to that. You've obviously have coached tens of thousands of people, and so
well, to be clear on that,
yes,
I have coached one-on-one with probably dozens of people, probably close to 100 maybe. But like through videos and through content and viewership and stuff, there have been six-figure people potentially, or at least five figures, but you know.
Got it. Makes total sense. So you just mentioned that running comps is one of the biggest challenges. If you had to expand that list and say, these are the top three things that I see brand new land flippers struggling with the most, what are those challenges? So you've already named the comps. What would be the other two?
Distraction would be the biggest one. There's a lot of things that feel like you're being productive, but they don't actually do anything. So figuring out if you've never done a deal before, finagling over your LLC name or your logo or trademark, that's all waste of time. You can do a deal under your first name. I mean, obviously you need to talk to CPA, and if you have assets worth protecting, like do what you need to do. But most people are building their net worth through land. So when you're just starting off, you don't have much to protect through an LLC. And and from a tax, talk to a CPA. I'm not giving tax advice. Don't believe anything I'm saying, because I don't know what I'm talking about. But like the tax, apples to apples, without a sophisticated tax strategy, there's not much of a tax difference between having a single member LLC and being a sole proprietor under your own name. So
Right.
it's not, just don't get bogged down with noise and get distracted. Stay focused and get to a deal as fast as humanly possible. So it boils down to just staying focused on core skill sets that will actually move the needle. So, and I think those boil down to three things. So that would be comps and due diligence, as I mentioned. It's talking to motivated sellers and understanding that whole art of negotiation and building rapport on the phone and all that stuff. Magic happens on the phone. You cannot, unless you're doing really cheap properties and you're selling stuff for like $99 down, $99 a month, the magic happens on the phone. You can't avoid that. So that's a core skill set. And then knowing how to present the offer, all that stuff. And then the third is knowing how to find, vet, and manage land specialized real estate agents. Outside of those three skill sets, at least in the model that we do, it's complete noise. It's complete distraction. So outsource it and automate it as much as humanly possible. So that would be distraction. And then, I don't know, maybe those three skill sets encompass the other one you were asking for.
Nice, very good. Yeah, I think that that's so important, because there are so many different moving parts and so many distractions in the business that it can feel like you're working and you're doing stuff and you're actually doing the business, and when it comes down to it, you have not moved the needle at all, right? So I think that that's really important. I had a very good friend and mentor tell me, if you're in the business of buying and selling houses and you haven't bought or sold a house in that day, then you are not doing your business, right? And I think that that's very, very good advice. And so, yeah, totally resonate with you there. So can you talk a little bit about these land specialist agents that you mentioned? Talk to us about how they play a role in your business.
Well, so it's funny. When I first got started in this whole land game, the conventional wisdom was that agents ruin deals, never incorporate an agent. Agents are terrible. Don't ever do it. My wife, I have to give credit where credit is due. I actually wrote a blog article about this where I interviewed my wife. So it's all like documented in land history at retipster.com. So if you go retipster.com land agents, you actually see me. This is probably 3 years old or so at this point, but we kind of, I don't know, like flip the script on the industry there a little bit, because it is very true that if you're working with an agent that is a house agent, then that they're a waste of time. They're going to ruin the deal. If you work with a local land specialized agent, they're an absolute game changer because they do a lot of the front end due diligence where they're actually walking the properties. I've had agents literally stake mock properties for like a 4-bedroom, 2-bath in North Carolina for free. And I said, I'll pay for this. And like, no, just as long as you list with me, no problem. And like, just do all kind of crazy stuff. So they're like our boots on the ground, and our favorite agents we rinse and repeat business with all the time. So the biggest bottleneck to the land business is getting properties sold. And we get to outsource that through agents because they have an active buyers list. Key is learning how to vet and find a truly local land specialized agent, because when you have one, they have buyers already in place. They already probably sold 2 lots down the street that are similar, comparable properties or whatever. And it's easy to work with them. So it's been an absolute game changer. And ever since that article came out, like people now use it as a viable strategy, at least on the blue ocean side. It's interesting.
Nice. And so how do you go about finding and vetting those kinds of agents?
So the most practical, like quick and dirty way to do it, if you use PropStream is very convenient because in a lot of markets, it pulls not only from public records, but also MLS sold. Don't know how they do that because I think they have to actually have MLS licenses in all of those regional markets of multiple licenses per state. But some like in non-disclosure states, like in Texas, you can get, we get sold comps. But that translates to is that if you are looking at a subject property and you do like a 2 to 3 mile radius, just do wide, and you just look for land, vacant land specifically, you can actually pull up MLS. You can pick up, if it's an MLS sold, you click on it and there's an extra tab that populates called MLS details. And then if you scroll down, you can actually see the agent contact information. Now you don't want to stop there. You want to take that agent's information and then look up some kind of profile online. Hopefully the most convenient is a Zillow profile, which you can also find through the agent finder function. There's a tab at the top of Zillow, but you want to look at their listings active and sold, and you want to see a ratio of at least 30 to 50% land to other types of real estate, and then call them and then have a conversation like, hey, I'm an investor. This is what I do. I'm looking to work with somebody who's local who can help me run some due diligence on the front end. In exchange, I'll list it with you if things pan out. And keep it generally short and sweet to the point. And if they're interested in working with you, they'll say, yeah, send me the APN number or give it to me now. I got my computer in front of me, and you're off to the races from there.
That's fantastic.
So I gotta say again, all credit goes to my wife because she's like not only the better half, but the better looking half too.
She's the mastermind behind the agent technique, right? So just so I understand that these are properties that you have already acquired and you've already bought. Is that right? Or when do you introduce the agents into the flow? Like if you're looking at a property and you say, hey, I need to do due diligence on this to see if it's something that I would be interested in buying, is that whenever you get the agent involved?
So if I was going to be absolutely honest in answering this question, it would get very complicated. What I need to do, and sorry for bumping the mic there, but what I need to do is actually build out a mind map, because there's a lot of, if this happens, then this series of events occurs. But to just keep it super basic for the sake of the audience and you guys here, generally, the agent comes in right before we get it under contract or directly after we get it under contract, where we enter into what I call due diligence phase 2. So due diligence phase 1 is like a 6-step checklist through MapRight, and then basic stuff that we do online. And if things look good from a probability standpoint, like most likely things will check out, we will proceed with making an offer. But a lot of the times people will counter back at a price that we're on the fence at, and we need to talk to an agent to see if we can actually tie it up at that price or even come up from where we're at in the negotiation. So we generally bring them on the front end of the deal to help us do a lot of the second phase due diligence. And I would say due diligence phase 3 is after we have it under contract. We'll call the county and the agent will walk the property, take a video a lot of the times, take pictures for us, all that. And they do all this for free until they list the property. They do this all for the commission. It's pretty amazing.
Nice. And so do you ever have agents push back that like, hey, this is not your property, so I'm not going to do due diligence once you have this, locked up, then come back and talk to me?
Sometimes, but it depends on how. So like in due diligence phase 2, I'm not having them do extensive due diligence. I want to have them be calling the county or walking the property. Sometimes they volunteer that because they're like, hey, in this market, because typography is so diverse, I have to come and get eyes on the property before I can give you evaluation. But
Right.
yeah, so.
Nice. So can you talk a little bit about phase 1 due diligence? Like you mentioned MapRight. What types of things do you look at? What's on that 6-point checklist that you look at to see if this is something that you're going to move forward with into phase 2?
Yeah, man. So 6-point checklist and map. So to high level, I generally run 80-90% of the time on 3 softwares: MapRight, PropStream, and Zillow. I do have access to DataTree, and if I need to supplement my research, I will use DataTree. But if you're starting off and you have to pay for DataTree, apples to apples, I think PropStream is more bang for your buck. If the market you're in, PropStream has ample data in certain markets, it's hit or miss. But where there is good data, it's like awesome because you can get very, very detailed information like HOA fees and prices that property sold for and a bunch of really cool stuff. You always have to approach everything from the perspective of like an investigator. So I look at the different softwares that I'm going to as like different people I'm interrogating, are like different versions of the story. And so what I'm looking for is a common thread between the different narratives to distill what actually is true, what actually took place, right? But each narrative is going to have a different degree of outliers, sometimes more, sometimes less. But I expect discrepancies. That's the grunt work, the day-to-day that we do as land investors all day long, is getting in there and figuring things out and figuring out what's going on. Because literally in MapRight, there's a tool called the area measurement tool. And I have seen it that what it does is it approximates what the acreage size should be, as opposed to what's listed based on recorded in the county. And I've seen that discrepancies as large as a property I actually bought before I started using MapRight in Virginia that was listed as 4.8 acres and it was 0.38 acres. This was before Drew was in my life. So he probably be like, hey, bro, we shouldn't buy that one. But, and the most recent one in Texas, we had a property that was, I believe, listed at 9.6. And after running it through the area measurement tool, it came out to 0.76. So like there's some major discrepancies there. So going back to the MapRight checklist, I look for road access, neighboring properties. I look at the 3D typography view and look to see how steep the elevation is. And if it has a steep elevation, if there are neighboring properties that have a similar elevation, and if they were suitable for building, then that means that it's most likely suitable for mine. But if not, then that's a big question mark as to whether or not it's going to be buildable. Then I use that area measurement tool and verify acreage size. And then I look at wetlands and flood zone.
Nice. Very good. And so when you are dealing with agents, how much commission are you offering them?
So the standard is 10%. But after you build a relationship with them, it's 6%. I mean, if my wife was on the line right now, she would be literally interrupting me and be like, Jaren, don't say that. You kidding me? What are you talking about? Because she's like, we never pay 10% ever. We like normally pay 6 to 8%, but that's because she's a good negotiator. And I think the more expensive properties default more to like residential type commission rates, like 6% and so on. But it's don't like get upset if you see somebody leading with 10%. It's kind of the industry standard.
Got it. And so are a lot of these deals that you're seeing your students do, are they infill lots? Are they large land acreage? What types of land deals are they?
Yeah. So I get this question a lot. And I don't think that it's the right. It's funny. I answered this question like earlier in like a coaching session. Um, so I don't think that that's the right question. Don't really care to specialize in a particular type of property or even a particular acreage size. What I do is I just go broad, and wherever opportunity presents itself, I'm going to find a land specialized agent that specializes in that type of property. So I'm going to find an infill lot agent for an infill lot property and a recreational hunting property. I'm going to use somebody like landsearch.com or landwatch or whatever, take your pick. And so that's kind of the approach there. I think it more boils down to price point, because if you can afford to do deals there, that's really what matters. And all things being equal, you want to be in the higher places of demand. Like if you could do deals in downtown New York City and you can afford to buy quarter acre lots there, that's where you're going to have the best agents and the best demand and the fastest opportunity to sell property if you can get a killer deal. But the question is, can you afford? I mean, let's say the average price is $500,000 per acre. I don't know if you can afford that. So you have to look through. I think that's really the crux of really market research is getting that intersection
Got it.
of affordability and demand.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was getting at is, there are definitely agents that specialize in different types of properties. I wouldn't go to, a run-of-the-mill house agent to say, hey, can you sell this, 600-acre ranch for me kind of thing.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
so can you talk a little bit about your process for running comps? You mentioned how important that was earlier in the skill set, and so for people that are out there listening, and they don't have MLS access, you mentioned PropStream has some MLS access. Can you talk a little bit about how you go about teaching to run comps?
Yeah. So to some degree in land, comps do boil down to getting reps in, because it's more art than it is science. It's like learning how it really boils down to pattern recognition. And so comps are our core skill set. That's hard. And that's why we can make a lot of money. That's why we can buy property, say $2,000 and sell it for 20 or whatever it is, right? So my due diligence process breaks down to, let's say, 3 phases to keep it simple. Due diligence phase 1, we kind of dived into. It's map right, check that 6-step checklist. Then we go to PropStream, and I do just some initial like recon on the property. I'll look and try to see if like what it was last bought for and what the last sale date was. Sometimes that information's there. If it's in an HOA, sometimes it's listed that it is, and how much the HOA fee is, what the assessed value is. Because sometimes I use the assessed value as negotiation leverage. Like, hey, the county says your property is worth 50,000 today. If we do a deal, I could do 65,500. Would that work for you? That kind of stuff. So I look at that, like take a few seconds to look at that stuff. Then I go to the sales and comparable report, and then I set it to vacant land and set it around the size of my subject property in terms of lot size, what have you. And then I look at comps. It's a variable as to whether or not PropStream is going to have comps. Sometimes they have a ton of comps and they have better comps than Zillow. Then other times they don't have any comps and you have to go to somewhere else. So it all depends, but I would probably say 60% of the time I get a good idea of what things are selling for. But the thing is that, again, it boils down to pattern recognition. Earlier, I was running comps on a property, and there were 2 different patterns that were emerging. This was a property in Arkansas, and one string was saying that the property would list around 60,000, and the other was saying that it would be 150,000. Until I talked to a local land specialized agent, I don't really know. This one had like a creek that like bled into a really beautiful water, and it might be one of the more expensive ones, but it's inconclusive. But to start the conversation, I'll lead in, especially since talking to him. This is by a coaching student, fellow land maverick. The guy's motivated, and so we're going to assume that this is a $60,000 property, and then if it heats up, we'll get an agent involved, and then go into due diligence phase 2, which, if there were strong negotiations involved or there was some hesitation, we would just have an agent, because it wasn't under contract. We just have them do like a desktop analysis or like a shoot from the hip. Like, I just generally know, the price per acre in this market is blah and that kind of stuff. And then we say, okay, well, based on that, we have to be at this, and so we'll handle our negotiations. And then if we get a signed contract or things get very close in negotiation, we might circle back a third time. Once we get it tied up, we'll enter into due diligence phase 3, where we're calling multiple different departments at the county, hearing directly from the horse's mouth what's going on with the property on several different circumstances. And then the agent will walk the property, take pictures, and ensure that access is suitable and all that. So that's our process.
That's great. And so when you're going through these different phases of due diligence, what are some of the top main deal breakers that you come across?
So wetlands and I would say access are probably the two biggest deal breakers. Now, there are workarounds. You could specialize in wetlands, and like there are actually like wetland conservation programs where if you like have 100 acres in wetlands, you can actually get like residual income from the government for like 30 years or whatever. And there's other like weird niche strategies. Duck hunters really like wetlands and stuff. So you could specialize in it, but you'd have to probably generate your own buyers or have your own kind of alternative strategy to flipping. Access also has an alternative strategy. I had a deal in Duval County, Florida, where I bought it for $2,000. It was one property removed from access, and I sued. I had to end up suing the neighbor to establish an easement because at the federal level, apparently every owner has the right to access their property. Now, certain states, it's harder than others. Like I hear in North Carolina, it's a no-go, but in Florida, it's relatively easy. So I had a attorney walk me through the process, and about 6 months later, I won a judgment. I tried my best to obviously pay the neighbors, work with the neighbors, and they weren't having it. And so I ended up just getting a surveyor and establishing an easement. And so it was probably 10,000 in, we sold it for 25. So I listed, I think maybe we sold it for 23 or something, 25, something like that. So, I mean, you could do like specialize in those things. However, keeping it high level, access is a big deal because you could be, bumped up to the side of a highway and it looks like you have access, but you actually don't because that highway doesn't have a ramp off to your property. I had a property, one of the few times I actually lost money on a deal was a property in Florida that had a road right next to it, but it was a private road. And I didn't know about this easement situation at the time. And so I bought it for 10,000, had to sell it for 8 to the neighbor.
Wow.
So I think access and wetlands are the biggest thing. And then depending on the market, flood zone is hit or miss. If you're in like Utah, flood zone is a big deal because there's not a lot of properties that are in a flood zone. Same thing with maybe like Colorado or a mountainous area. But if you're in Florida, it's like normal to be in a flood zone. So it doesn't really matter. So you have to kind of know specifically whether that's a big deal or not. But it's good to be, if you see your property's in a flood zone, a big 80-20 indicator is if there's a property right next door that's also in a flood zone, you're probably okay.
Very good. Very, very good advice there. So you mentioned earlier that talking to sellers was a big part of the skill set necessary to be successful in the land game. So what are some of the top, like what would you say are the top 3 techniques and strategies when talking with sellers?
So this comes very like just out of the school of hard knocks. I'm not very well trained on sales or anything, but I've done it a lot because I had to, obviously for like, 2 years or so at Simple Wholesaling, whatever it was, I legit had to sell like 25 to 30 properties a month. We took title to properties and we had like, $70,000 plus overhead that we had to deal with. It was so intense that literally every month on the last day of the month, it was either going to be the best month of the year or the worst. We were either going to like lose a bunch of money or make a bunch. It was very cutthroat. So I learned through just trial by fire, I guess you could say. My biggest thing is learning to assess very quickly who you're talking to and trying to predict the type of outcome that this person wants to have on the phone and then facilitating that experience. Because the objective really isn't to seal the deal today. The objective is to make an impression that's so memorable that 6 months down the road, when they are ready to sell, they call you first because they liked you the most. So if I'm talking to a grandma in the hills of Tennessee, I'm going to be talking to her for 15, 30 minutes and listening to her whole life story about everything, grandkids and her deceased husband and her, blah, 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 and all this stuff. If I'm talking to a former stockbroker who's retired, he's from New York, but now living in Florida, it's a 5-minute conversation. Get straight to the point. And a lot of the times they initiate that personality type will initiate aggressive behavior to like try to see if you're weakling or if you're, alpha dog, like kind of they check you like how much experience you have. You sound like you're 12. And then to see how you respond, and you're like, I'm not 12, we do blah, 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 blah. Like there's things you pick up and the objective, again, it's not mirroring in the sense of like matching their tone or like their personality in that way. It's like identifying the most optimal experience for them to have and then facilitating that. And I think using lots of different points of connection also helps. I have a very eclectic background, like lots of crazy experiences, lots of diversity. Like I spent half my childhood in California, half my childhood in Georgia. And in Georgia, my dad was married to a Puerto Rican woman. There were like 9 people living in my house, and like people didn't even speak English growing up, but I was in the South. So it was like super, all this crazy layered stuff. So I could talk to people about a lot of different things and have lots of different points of interest and finding those points of commonality. And I also kind of think to some degree, there's an integrity and an ethics line that I think you need to have. Like you don't want to fall into manipulation. But if I don't really care politically where people align, like I'm not really into politics personally. But if I'm talking to somebody who airs more Republican, right, I will talk to them about like things that are more in line with their interests. Like I like shooting guns, right? I like, I'm not as cool as Drew when it comes to shooting guns, but I have a shotgun. I've never used it, so I can maybe like hit somebody with it, but I'm a work in progress. I've gone and shot guns with Drew before. So I'd talk about that. I make jokes about that, right? If I'm talking to somebody who's more liberal and it's clear that they don't like Donald Trump or whatever, I would make a joke like, because whether you like him or hate him, I think everybody would agree that he would be better off reading How to Win Friends and Influence People. You know what I mean? The guy has a little bit of a mouth. So like I would say something like that. So it's like a lighthearted thing, but it's connecting with kind of what their values while still remaining neutral, right? So again, I think there's a line of ethics that you have to not cross, but really identifying that positive outcome that they want to have and facilitating it, I think is key. Making a big impression.
That's really good. And I think a lot of people, I mean, myself included, especially when you first get started, you think so much about the deal and getting the type of deal and the numbers, and you really forget the fact that like this is a people business, right? And so just keeping that in mind and making sure that person is not just a seller, they're a customer, and there is a customer experience. And so I really like that approach that you take there. That's very, very cool. Can you talk a little bit about how you go about finding like marketing for deals? Like, what's your marketing on the acquisition side look like? Do you text? Do you like to send mail, cold call? What's your jam when it comes to that?
Yeah. So I would say we are predominantly texting, but we're doing 5,000 units of mail every month. And my wife just went gangbusters and went crazy. And I think she bumped up to like 1,200 texts a day for a minute. And then we had to like calm it down because I was like, dude, we got kids and we got to like eat dinner and stuff, like chill out on all this stuff. And so we bumped back down to like 700. So I think we're sitting around 700 a day. It's somewhere around 700 to 1,000 a day, like during work days. So it's 20 days. So that's like at 500, it would be about 10,000. So I think we're like, I don't know, 15,000 a month, something like that.
Nice. And so are you using those, are you using texting and mail concurrently to the same people? Or are you using them, different people? How does that work?
Right now it's separate. We are moving towards having a more streamlined process where we'll mail first and then text. We'll probably actually text first, then mail second. Well, going back and forth on it. What's nice about mailing first is that you have something to text about. Hey, I sent you a letter. Did you get it? But yeah, so but I'm curious to see, I have a hypothesis forming that depending on the marketing method you use, you have a different type of seller that responds. Like sellers, generally, I've sworn up and down to target senior owners forever and ever and ever. but I think senior owners respond well to direct mail, but like millennials or maybe the children, if you were targeting heirs, for example, might respond better to text. So you might hit a younger demographic that's more tech savvy with text response and stuff. So it's interesting. But when text is newer, we've only been doing it for about 2 or 3 months, but we got like, I think we got like conservatively, I'm being very conservative, like 12 deals last month directly from texting.
Yeah.
You're my line. I'm being conservative, right?
I just know it's an overwhelming amount. I've spent a lot of time finding money. So it's a very good problem to have.
That's great. That's great. So when you're texting, what type of texting platform do you use?
Launch control. Callan, hey, Callan is your girl. I'll tell you. Go talk to Callan.
Nice.
She's, she wants to work with people who have done a handful of deals. I kind of specialize working with people who are more in the beginning stages. I definitely work with people who are scaling too. But if you want to go from like 6 figures to 7 figures, Callan is the one you want to talk to over at REI Optimize. But it's a very similar platform. So I use direct skip, launch control. We have different scripts that we use. Drew's actually a copywriter master in disguise. Like, so he's like going to be working with us in Land Maverick Society to like help us have like epic, amazing converting scripts. So
nice.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about like what are some of your favorite tools outside of, you mentioned MapRight, you've mentioned launch control, but like what are some of your PropStream, what are some of your other favorite tools? Like what do you use for CRM, for example?
So I'll circle back to CRM. I want to do a shout out to Zillow because a lot of people underestimate free things, but Zillow I use every single day, and I think it has the most amount of data, therefore the most accurate data. So I would err on Zillow as opposed to realtor.com or what have you. Back to the CRM tool. I am in the process of building out a proprietary software in my own company because I can't find a solution that is suitable for me.
Yeah.
And I'm frustrated and I just want to turn around and make it happen. And I found out, thank God for modern technology, because I don't actually have to hire software engineers. HiveMind, which is a popular CRM for land investors, is actually built on something called Go High Level, which is like a plug and play. So you have like Go High Level support to handle all the back end like trouble if there's any tech issues, but
Right.
you can just like plug and play a software. So we're going to be building an integrated software with supercharge offers. We have a pretty strong strategic relationship. They're our mail house and marketing house. That's who we do our website with and what have you, as well as our VA company. We have a company called Virtual Outsource that like will do text build out for people and due diligence and list scrubbing. And we're actually building out like phone intakers and some potential closers, trial clients. We'll see if we can nail it. Filipino-based closers are going to be tough, but so it'll all integrate into that. So obviously I would not like a selfish like bent towards my own thing. If that's not because it doesn't exist yet, it's in the making. I would probably look at Fresh Sales or Follow Up Boss. And Follow Up Boss is pretty awesome. And you could run the key thing that you want in a software, you want a pipeline feature. You want automatic follow-up. So an automatic follow-up sequence would be like, okay, I set this tag to cold. And maybe you have cold tier 1, cold tier 2, cold tier 3. And severe cold has follow-up that touches base once a quarter over the next 3 years. And then cold tier 1 is once a month or whatever it is, but it's automatically prompting out emails, text, prompt like automatic tasks to say, hey, call this person today to just do a check-in. Those and all that, those ringless voicemail drops, all those things are pre-set up and send out automatically, so you don't have to think about it. That's really the key thing that you want in a CRM when you're scaling, not in a task management feature. So I really like REI Pebble as well. Pebble is a great out-of-the-box software, but it is missing that automatic follow-up sequence and that task management. I think they're in the works of building up those features. If I had to snap my fingers and say, hey, you want something out of the box, maybe go there, but you don't really need that And if you're not mailing through them, it's pretty they're a little bit expensive if you're not going to mail through them. So if you're mailing through something like supercharge offers or some other means, you could do something like a pipeline build out in Trello for free, or a lot of us just use a Google Sheet. I mean, I use a Google Sheet for like the first 3.5 years of my business.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be fancy.
Yeah, for sure. Nice. And so, can you talk a little bit about, you've talked a lot about beginners and what their challenges are. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about what are the top 3 challenges that you see people that are looking to scale come across?
Stop doing blind offers. Like, raise your hand, and everyone who is trying to scale, promise me you will never try to do another blind offer campaign ever again. Blind offers are very suitable for cheap red ocean properties. So I know a guy who specializes in buying stuff that's like dumpy, like it's the property that people will pay you for, and he'll buy it for anything that he can get it, like $50, and then he'll sell it for $99 down, $99 a month. Blind offers were great for that strategy because it's 80-20. And I think his voicemail literally says, don't leave a voicemail. Don't call me. If you want me to buy your property, sign the purchase agreement and send it back to me. Thanks. Right. Like, I think it's like that extreme. I could be making that up, but it delivers my point.
Talk about customer experience.
Yeah. So like, so blind offers work for that. But and he's in Florida, by the way, where the typography is extremely flat and predictable, which is also conducive for like makes it a lot easier to do blind offers. You do North Carolina or Virginia or anywhere that has mountains, Tennessee, and good luck, because literally a property could be valued difference between 15,000 and 50,000 just because of a view. Like it's crazy.
Wow.
So, stop doing blind offers if you want to scale. It used to take me a month to prepare my blind offer list, and that was always wrong anyway. So don't do it. Just do neutral letters and be happy. And like, especially if you're doing more expensive properties, you got to do neutral letters.
Got it. Any other challenges that people that are scaling tend to have?
This isn't really for people who are scaling, but it's worth saying. It's to reiterate the phone. You cannot be afraid of the phone in this business. You cannot send people to a website or like, maybe if you're like just testing the waters and it's just starting off as a part-time thing, but if you really want to turn this thing into a real business, like optimize for the phone, like from text to phone, from like online listing to phone, direct mail to phone, because when people are on a screen, they don't make a personal connection, but on the phone, you have laughs, you have blunders, you have, different things that happen that create a connection. And it's that connection that leads to a deal. My wife, excuse me. My wife and I had a acquisition manager for like a month. It didn't work out. Again, a scaling issue of just growing faster than I should have. But at the time, he was working the lead. My wife was also working the same lead. And they were kind of doing this good cop, bad cop routine. I don't know if that's ethical, by the way. I don't know if I personally was involved, if I would be doing that, but they were doing that. Take it or leave it. So this property was in Alabama. This acquisition manager of mine lived in Alabama. And my wife called the lead and offered more than my acquisition manager was offering. Again, trying to just play the lead to seal the deal. Well, the lady went with the lower offer with our acquisition manager because they had a mutual friend on Facebook and they were both in Alabama and she felt more comfortable with it. So they will sell to you at a cheaper price if they like you. That's just the truth. So make sure that they like you and optimize for that.
Yeah, really good. I mean, I think we hear that all the time. Wait, we lost your feed, your sound feed, but while you're getting that connected, there we go.
I karate chopped the crap out of my mic.
Getting animated. You're passionate about this subject. They gotta like you. They gotta connect with you.
By the way, I forgot to tell you guys when I introduced Drew, this is Drew's picture on my wall. He's like, somebody drew like a whole thing. So every single time I do a Zoom meeting, every time I train a land maverick, like Drew's in the background, just chilling. So.
Right on.
I have to explain that. So I'm not that vain that I hired someone to paint me. It's that in college there was a starving artist and she needed some money. So I'm like, hey, paint a ridiculous portrait of me smoking a pipe against a motorcycle with a Japanese sunset. And so now that's living in Jaren's office.
Very good. Very good. I see a logo opportunity here.
That should be our I Buy Land logo for sure.
Yeah. Good stuff. So, whenever you sell on the dispo side, are you guys selling just for cash? Are you selling on notes? Like, what are you looking at?
Only cash. Yeah. So, and always through agents. So I would sell a property on terms. And I think we do offer that in the listing. We say like, hey, for on the right conditions, we'll offer it on terms, but it's very specific. There's a guy, I forgot his name, but he's actually in the Chicago burbs, but he's a note broker that specializes in land. And as long as you set it up properly, so you use a private mortgage as opposed to a land contract, and you get a certain percentage down and stuff, he'll buy you out at 80 cents on the dollar at closing. And then I have another note broker friend who's based in Indianapolis who will do that. He'll do something similar at closing about 50% of the time. And then the other time he'll actually help you broker it. So you have to wait until you get 3 consistent payments, and then you can turn around and sell off the note for say 80 cents on the dollar. So I wouldn't be opposed to doing that. I just never have ran into the need. Like every time we end up selling for cash. Sometimes we sell on a property for 8 months or something, but we always, within a year, we always sell property. And on average, we're selling a property in about 3 months.
Nice. Very good. That's great. How do you go about raising money for deals?
Dude, that's all Drew. I just said, my wife just says, Drew, I need money. And he says, okay. And he just wires money. It's the most like ridiculous, like relationship. I mean, you can interpret this however you want, because, I know people have different faiths and lack thereof, but I think that our connection is definitely a God thing, because I'm a little bit of a diva and I don't want to have to deal with people nitpicking about deals and stuff. And Drew's like the perfect funder. Like my wife doesn't have to stress about whether we have money for deals. She just focuses on what she's good at, which is getting deals. And then I focus on what I'm good at, which is like training people and empowering people and all that. And like, it's like this perfect relationship. And Drew just probably doesn't sleep at night and like pulls out his hair and like prays and fasts like 48 days a week, like 40 days every quarter or something, however that works. But yeah, I mean, it's Drew could probably speak to that, but I think the majority of our working capital is personally funded, like by him. So
Nice.
It's all private, I think.
Like 90% of it is my own money. I just recently ran out of my own money, which is a very good thing. And so I've started accepting a little bit of backup funds. But we're trying to keep it in-house as much as we can, just so we can retain more of those profits. But I think a big part of it is I just know how thorough Jaren and Asia are on their due diligence.
Mostly Asia.
Yeah, Asia, his wife is the golden goose. And so there was one time I actually really comped one of her deals and I vetted it. And it was a cheapo buy for 6,000. She was going to list for 17. And I thought it was only worth 9. And I said, hey, I'm not going to say anything. And if I'm right, we'll have that conversation after we have a break-even deal, right? Because buy for 6, sell for 9, that's like break-even after closing costs. She sold it, the realtor sold it for 16 2 weeks later, so 1,000 below asking. And after that, I'm like, you know what? What's the point of me even challenging Asia when I'm just wrong anyways? And if I would have challenged her beforehand, she would have probably second-guessed herself and maybe lowered the price. I don't know.
I would have.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I think it illustrates a really important component to doing land deals, especially when you're working on a team, is to find people that can complement your strengths and your weaknesses, and then operate in your zone of genius, right? Like that takes away a lot of friction, and I think that that a lot of magic happens that way. So that's very, very cool that you guys have that relationship set up that way.
Yeah,
So
it took me a long time to figure that out. You
yeah,
can't be a jack of all trades, man.
yeah,
Like, I suck at most things and I'm like really good at like 2 things. And so I just need to like optimize the 2 things that I'm really good at and like outsource or automate the things I suck at.
So what are those two things? What's your superpower, Jaren?
So that it's a little awkward, but I would probably say that I am really, really good at coaching. I've never taken a formal class or training or read a formal book, but every single one of our coaching students that sticks with me and doesn't quit on me gets a deal eventually.
Nice.
Sometimes it's taken over a year, but I mean, everybody gets a deal because a lot of getting from 0 to 1 deal is more mental and psychology more than anything else. Um, but yeah, it's funny because it could take you a year to get to your first deal and then take you a week to get to your second. It's the weirdest thing in the world. But yeah, so sorry, I lost my train of thought there. What was the original question?
Your superpower. What are your
This is why, because I feel awkward answering this question. So I'm losing my train of thought. So yeah, I think it's probably just empowering and teaching people. I think I'm like a decent land investor. I know that apples to apples, the thing is being able to fund students deals gives us an ability to really scale and like partner at scale. So it's just kind of cool. That was kind of a backwards blessing in disguise because I didn't really think about that, but that's how it kind of manifested. But I could understand the appeal of just wanting to double down and focusing on land deals. But I'm just wired for coaching, man. Like I'm just better at it. I wake up every day and we do it very different. Like I give my cell phone number out to everybody we work with. We actually call seller leads together. My wife is available during working hours as well to run comps called Due Diligence, all that stuff. And we just really actually empower people to do this business, like it's kind of like I don't know, we're like the millennials that like kind of grew up and like finally became gurus, but like we actually really value authenticity and results, so we actually like have results for people and like make sure it happens. It's funny, but that's kind of like where we're at.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think that that's a really important skill set to have because, I think that there's so many people. If you've been in the real estate space for any amount of time, you know that there's no shortage of people that are like looking to teach or anything like that. But it really is a different type of skill set. My background, I am a teacher. I taught public school, I taught music. Um, it's a different skill set. It's not just teach what you know, right? Because it teaching and coaching and empowering and speaking to the mindset piece and unlocking that in people. I think that it's definitely a different skill set other than just having the experience of doing something, right?
Well, it's empowering them to evolve into something bigger. Like when you give somebody a skill set, like learning how to run comps or even learn how to use a particular software, like I really like the way like Jewish rabbis, I'm not Jewish, but I listen to a lot of like Jewish rabbis teachings and like read a lot of Jewish books and stuff. And their basis for teaching is not to give the answer, but to lead you through a series of questions for you to come to the conclusion yourself. And I'm not the best at that, but that's kind of like my North Star of what I try to become. Is I really want to have them pulling up the software, have the Land Mavericks actually like, and I'll draw on their screen, like click this button and like really giving a man a fish instead of just, teaching a man a fish rather than giving a man a fish.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm right with you there. I love that whole Socratic method of teaching through a series of questions, because I think that, like giving a man a fish, you can give the person the answer, but it's nothing compared to them figuring out on their own, having been guided by you, and then the payoff is not only do they get the answer, but they get that confidence in themselves that they can do it, and it empowers them to do the next step and then the next step, right? That's incredible. So what is the answer to if someone were to ask you, what do you do? What's your favorite answer to that question?
I say I'm a real estate investing educator.
Nice. Very good.
And I actually had a like crossroads moment. I had to decide, am I an investor first or am I an educator first? Because if I'm an educator first, I give you my best agents, I teach you my best secrets. If I'm a land investor first, I reserve that for myself, right?
Right.
And so I think my wife is a land investor first, but I'm definitely a coach first. So my wife will sometimes tell me, no, I'm not going to teach you what I'm doing in texting because you're going to tell everybody. We have some of these conversations. But
Nice. So I do want to chat with you a little bit about the you brought up earlier that you'll help fund deals for your students up to 150,000. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that's structured and how that came to be?
Yeah, so it's very straightforward. 9 times out of 10, we're involved in the lead from inception. So we know that it's a deal because we've already talked to the agents. A lot of the times there are agents that we have an existing relationship with. And so up to 250,000, it's generally a 50-50 split as long as we can list it at a multiple. We can buy it at, and on the lower end, we don't normally do deals under $30,000 market value. So we'll buy at 15,000, list at 30. And we always in our blue ocean space try to list at a multiple. So if we buy at 30, list at 60, 60, 120, so on and so forth. So it's a pretty clear cut 50-50 split. We take title in our name, and then we have an investor agreement that accompanies each deal. So if we do any funny business, you can sue us to protect your interests, all that stuff, right? So it's very simple, very straightforward. When we get to the 250,000 mark, we will still fund deals that exceed that, especially subdivide deals and what have you. We're just a lot more picky. And what that translates to is if it's a bona fide deal, we might have to do a 60-40 split in our favor because there's more capital at risk that we could have otherwise deployed in smaller deals. So that's kind of the cut and dry. And it's property by property. If it's a thinner deal or there's more risk involved, like maybe half of it's in wetlands or something, it might take a while to sell. There might be some negotiation back and forth, but it's generally either a 50-50 split 90% of the time and maybe 10% of the time a 60-40 split in our favor. So yeah, very straightforward.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great, it definitely helps that barrier to entry that a lot of people have when they're entering the land flipping space is that, and they may have the knowledge and they may learn, but they don't have the money to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So let me ask this: if someone is not part of your program, where they have access to this 150K for funding, right? And they are a brand new investor or a brand new land flipper and they have zero money. What would you tell them to get, how would you advise them to get started on their land flipping journey?
Yeah. So here's the thing. Money is out there. It's very interesting, but the more money I've made, the more money I've realized that money is literally everywhere. If you drive down a street in an urban city, all the skyscrapers, all the buildings, you're literally driving by hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. And so money is unlimited. There's so much money out there. So just don't worry about money. Worry about getting a deal. If you have an amazing deal, trust me, I'm kind of weird because again, I'm not like I'm a weird personality to be in the seat. I'm not necessarily money motivated, but like most land investors, most entrepreneurs are. Drew is, my wife is. So you go show my wife a deal, you go show Drew a deal, they're gonna be like, oh, this is a deal. They're gonna be super excited and they're gonna be prone to work with you, and they'll probably fund your deal, right? We normally reserve our capital with people we have an existing relationship with. We don't. Outside of Land Maverick Society, people aren't trained in our ideology, so they won't know what a good deal is and what a bad deal is. But there are a handful of people that we've started building some relationships with, some like wholesalers and some things. So for the right opportunity, like if it's a deal, we'd fund it, but anybody would fund it. A good deal is going to be like, you just throw it up on one of the Facebook groups and, I mean, Kindle will fund your deal. I mean, come on.
So let's say, someone's listening to you and this is their first, foray into land flipping and they are sold. They're ready to do a deal. They're ready to go find a deal. They're ready to get on the phone, talk to sellers. How do they find their first deal?
It depends on what strategy they want to do. Like if they want to do the cheaper stuff and sell on terms or some more expensive stuff, I would look at Once Upon a Brick, Peter Nukasani. If you haven't had him on, he's like a super genius. He's kind of like Ajay. I think he's like 23 or 24. And he's like yeah, I met up with him with Beer Spa on Monday, and he like showed up with like a Rolex and like a Hummer from like 2012 or something. But he's a character. He travels the world. He's
Nice.
a great guy. But he's an actual legit land wholesaler that you could literally scour through his inventory on his website and most likely find a deal. Just buy it from him, turn around and make money. And then, it might not be the greatest deal in the world, but you might make $3,000 or $5,000 or something like that. And then you do enough of those, build up to where you have a marketing budget. And then I would send out, and depending on the market, I think you're looking at between some markets. We had somebody get an awesome deal in Tennessee recently at 2,000 units a mail. Drew mentioned it, buy at 130, list at 260. But there are other people that, like in Florida, you're probably looking at like 1 to 5 to 1 to 10,000 units a mail. So it all depends. But I would save up for probably at least 5 to 10,000 units of mail, which is going to be roughly $1 per letter. So I'd save up 5 to 10 grand, and and then take that and then do a direct mail campaign. And once you have enough money to submit, like, I don't know, $1,000 a month towards marketing, I would introduce texting. Texting is a little bit wild west and might be scrutinized and shut down in the near future. But for now, we're seeing the most results right now in texting. Well, we're seeing about an equal amount of results unit per unit in direct mail, but it's cheaper. Texting is cheaper. So that's,
Yeah. You can have if you're doing $1 a letter, a text is a couple cents,
yeah.
too. So nice. Very good. So if you could tell yourself 3 pieces of advice when you were brand new, if you could go back when you're, brand new baby Jaren to land flipping or real estate in general, what advice would you have?
Yeah, man. So this is going to be kind of probably weird and unexpected, but I'm going to say that rest is essential for success. I was a poster board child for a number of years for hustle culture and pedal to the metal and grind yourself to the bone and not sleeping and all this. And I actually had a burnout, like a midlife crisis. I had like turned 30 and like everything shut down. I wasn't sleeping well and gained a bunch of weight and all this stuff. And though it's extremely counterintuitive, if you rest at least 1 full day a week, you come to the table fresh. And the truth is, work ethic only gets you so far. If you equal the playing field and everybody has the same degree of work ethic, roughly everybody has the same degree of maintenance time for sleep and, going to the bathroom and so on. So if you have people who are optimized for strong work ethic, everybody's the same. So the only real leverage point you have is the decisions that you make. So it boils down to strategy. It boils down to chess playing. And if you're going to play a game of chess, you need to come optimized mentally. And it's weird, but when you're stressed out and you're tired, you're burnt out, you're in fight or flight, which from an evolutionary standpoint is more animalistic. It's lower level thinking. So if you want to think $1 million level decision-making level thinking, you got to come from a place that's fresh and that's almost pampered in a way. Look at it like this. A king doesn't act like a peasant. A peasant and a king goes and gets in luxury baths and has lotions and all this other stuff, because a king is a different quality of person, and a lot of that boils down to how that person takes care of themselves. The king is not gonna go and do grunt work because he has to. His value comes from his high level thinking, his strategy, and so on. So, yeah, we again are not Jewish, but these Jews, they're an 80-20. I'm an 80-20 guy. And they have a disproportionate amount of the results in the world. They're one of the smallest populations, and they have a disproportionate amount of the wealth, disproportionate amount of the Nobel Peace Prizes. They're in high levels of influence across a number of different fields. They're awesome, and the world should be taking notes. Jews have this degree of leverage, I don't think on accident. I think it comes from the fact that the core of their religion is practicing Shabbat, which is Sabbath. And so they're one of the most hardest working people. They work generally 6 days a week culturally, but they shut down Friday night and they're dead to the world. They exit the world and they enter into heaven. I've even heard like a Jewish guy named Eric Weinstein on a podcast, on the Joe Rogan podcast. He says, I'm an atheist, except on Friday night. On Shabbat, I believe. So I think, yeah, so like I am a huge proponent that if you want to advance in life, when we started practice, we do like our own version of Shabbat. We're not heavy. We still watch movies and like do things like that. But I'm dead to work on Saturday night. Or sorry, all day Saturday and Friday night. And we have Thanksgiving pretty much every Friday. So it's so common in my house that my kids, like if there's a birthday or it is actually Thanksgiving, they'll pipe up and be like, Shabbat Shalom, because they're more accustomed to it being that spirit of festivity, right?
Nice.
So we really, once we started doing that, everything shifted financially, everything shifted in the results in my life, in my habits, in my personal growth. Everything changed because I was rested. I actually got the sleep I needed. I just needed to go take a nap. And that was my problem.
Yeah.
So that's my big one, rest.
That's really, really good. Right. And that's so easy to completely like just gloss over, right? Like, like you said, hustle culture and grind culture. We see so many, especially business influencers that, kind of tout that whole, grind until, you hit metal kind of
I
thing.
work every day that I'm awake. Every morning I'm awake. If I'm driving my whatever, I'm blah, 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 texting. It's like, well, okay.
Yeah. I get it. Nice, man. Very cool. I do want to talk a little bit about where do you see the market going now and how do you plan on thriving in that upcoming market shift?
Yeah. So I think we're in a perfect storm in the land business because we have a bunch of political unrest and economic unrest that is pushing people to go off grid and to go remote and to go, and then there's all this cultural push to be able to work from home and work remote. So there's all this more and more opportunity to actually live a rural lifestyle, but have a decent living and all these things. So there's this big push towards land in that regard. There's also a housing issue, a massive housing issue nationwide, where despite the economic factors, people need housing. So there's always going to be developers. There's always going to be people who are, especially on the multifamily side, there's always going to be demand there. I do think that there's a small segment of land that's largely impacted by the mortgage rates and stuff. And that's where it's like the zoning type is only suitable for like only a stick-built house that is like really large, and because it's like a waterfront property. So the $200,000, $400,000 waterfront property, and that's in a wetland or in a flood zone that has to be on stilts in Florida, those are a little bit risky because you're going to have to get a builder's loan for that, and you're going to get negatively impacted by the interest rates and stuff. But outside of those kind of pretty nuanced situations, most things in land have always been done in cash. So we're not impacted by the mortgage rates like at all. Like it doesn't impact us because everything's done in cash. We buy and sell stuff, 100,000 and then, sell it 200, whatever. So.
Nice. Very good. Very good. Who are you mentioned a few different, books that you read and things like that, but do you have any favorite entrepreneurs or business owners that you follow?
Perry Marshall. Perry Marshall is my freaking superhero.
Nice.
And it's weird that he's a real live human being, but yeah, it's really funny because I've kind of put my foot in my mouth so many times with that guy. If you guys don't know who he is, he's like the guy that wrote the first book on like Google ads and Facebook ads. He runs in circles with like Dan Kennedy and like all these high level dudes. I met him at church randomly, and my pastor was like, hey, this guy wrote the book on Facebook. I thought he was just like an ad agency, like nothing special. And no. Like this dude's like he charges like $4,000 an hour to like meet with this guy. And I'm like, hey, will you be my mentor? Like I totally pulled that card on him. And like, he kind of sort of said yes, but like kind of not really. And so it's really funny. His books have radically changed my life. Like he wrote mini books, Evolution 2.0, a bunch of stuff on marketing, 80/20 sales and marketing, as I mentioned before, and then memos from the head office. Hands down, that guy has probably had the single most largest impact on my life and personal mentality, life philosophy, all that. So he's not very well known, but he's very 80/20. So for those who want high leverage, that's the camp that you want to be a part of. He's an incredible guy. Yeah.
That's incredible. Absolutely incredible. What is the biggest surprise you've had so far on your journey in the land space?
That my wife is more right than me majority of the time. Yeah. No, no, but I think to some degree that's true. Like she's had a knack for questioning conventional wisdom. And there's a lot of things that we do that brushes up against what was conventional at the time that we started. For example, like the rule of thumb when we first got started was that you want to look for in terms of market research, a county that has a population density of less than 100 people per square mile. Like we don't use that. We don't teach that. We've brushed up against that very hard because that on face value just teaches that you're in a rural county. Like that just, and that means less demand, not more, right? The agent thing, going, saying pretty strongly, neutral letters is the way to go, not blind offers. These kind of strong statements, like we brush up against it because we see that it works, So I think it's okay. It's a catch-22 because to some degree, I'd probably say it like this. You want to leverage doing exactly what everybody else is doing 80% within your business when you're first getting started, because you need a model and some kind of a framework to start off of, but then be okay to experiment 20% of the time and try to find leverage points.
Really good. That's really good. What's your biggest passion or goal that you have in your life that you'd like to achieve at this point?
Man, I'm really weird. I'm a weird guy. I don't actually, so I in this whole, I told you I had a midlife crisis thing. I died to goal setting because I was I'm an Enneagram type 3. So I was obsessed. This is so crazy, but I used to walk around Savannah, Georgia. And I'd see these statues of John Wesley and all these influencer people. One day I'm going to have statues made in my honor. Right. I was so stupid. So, in my self-development, let's say, I died to the need for a lot of those type of things. And so I don't really live my life with goals. I live very similar to the philosophy of Atomic Habits. So I want to have really good daily habits that are going to lead to accomplishments that would surpass my goals anyway. So, because goals stress me out, man. I hit my mic second time. Sorry, guys. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Sorry, getting too excited over here.
Good, man. It's all good. I love it.
Yeah. So I don't really set goals. I would say you could call it religion. You could call it whatever you want. I had a really radical encounter with something that said his name was Jesus when I was August 25th, 2006. And I was not a Christian growing up. I used to do a bunch of drugs and I was in group homes and a bunch of stuff. And I don't care what you want to call it. I'm not into religion or going tit for tat, but there's a thing out there that really cares about people. And actually it's an energy, a spirit, God. And yeah, that thing is what dictates my life. I really try to live my life by what I call the voice of God. You could call it intuition if you are uncomfortable with that language, but I try to have a much larger purpose guide my decision making.
That's really fascinating. I'd love to hear more about that journey at some point because I think that's a podcast episode in and of itself, man.
Yeah, man. It goes pretty deep. I met my wife on a mission trip and I was actually living in a homeless shelter as a superintendent. I was 19, telling 40-year-old homeless people to go brush their teeth and stuff. It's the weirdest thing in the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Man, you were not kidding when you said you have a wealth of experience, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So what makes you feel inspired or like your best self?
I think working in my strengths, man, again, I suck at most things, and being okay with that, like coming to terms with like, hey, I'm not very good with like getting back to people on emails, so I should outsource that. I should get a team to like handle that. So I got to have like a certain level of professionalism, like, but I can be okay with the fact that like I suck at logistics and I can just like outsource that. But I'm really good at getting people unstuck and helping people solve problems and really learn the skill set of comping and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I need to double down on and get better at. Like if I get some more margin, that's what I should put money towards in terms of self-developing, is like how can I become a better communicator? How can I, be more concise and be more articulate, have better analogies, those kind of things. Because that's what my superpower is. So that's the sword I should sharpen. That's it.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that. Especially when you look at it from a perspective of like, I'm embracing what what my superpowers are, and I'm not feeling bad about the stuff that I am not. I think that you walk in a certain type of power when you embrace that, and it's really cool. Um, I just, I'm very thankful for you being on with us today. I want to thank you for being so generous with your time and for giving to us today. How can we give back to you? Like, what things are you looking for? What resources, connections are you looking for currently that we can help you with?
So I've had this podcast that I literally have 15 episodes recorded. I've been trying to launch this thing. But I was just talking to Drew about it earlier. I realized I had a mental block about it because it's pretty vulnerable, like to go through. And like at that time, we were still figuring out a lot of things, but I've finally figured out how to get over the hesitation in my head. And we're launching the first week of April.
Congrats.
So
Nice.
if you guys would check us out, Land Maverick Society on Facebook, and then be on the lookout for the Land Maverick podcast. And then I got to get you on the show, man.
I'd love it.
Yeah.
I'd love it. I'd love to be on the show. Drew is in. Drew is back.
And I've been wanting to say this for the entire time. I think we should all take a moment of silence to just admire Drew's hair because it's fantastic. And I'm very jealous because, I mean, come on. Good job, bro. Hair looks great.
Oh, you know why? It's because I toured a house today that was renting for $6,000. And I wanted to make a good impression on the agent listing it. But hey, a plug for us. We have a mastermind happening in Seoul, South Korea a month from now, and we have 2 seats left. We don't need to sell the seats, but they are openings. If somebody already has their passport and they're already rocking and rolling with their land business and they would add a lot of value to the group, we'd love them to hop on a discovery call with Jaren. Worst case scenario, you get free coaching for 30 minutes.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah, and that's going to be all high level guys. So high 6-figure, 7-figure land investors, a bunch of coaches represented from different camps. So like Ajay Sharma from Learn.Land. Drew is a coach with Land Sharks. And then there's going to be a guy named Buck who is from the Travis King camp. I'll be there. Both Jesse and Kevin from REI Pebble are going to be there as well. So it's going to be a hot seat model. We're going to be able to deep dive with high level land guys. It's going to be
right
awesome.
on. And what's the date for that?
April 27th to the 30th.
Yep.
Look at me, Drew. I'm remembering. Look at that.
Right on. Right on. So, Jaren, if people want to get in touch with you, how can they find you? What's your contact information? What's the best way for them to get plugged in with you if they're interested in Land Maverick Society?
Yeah. So I have a Calendly link. So go to calendly.com/JarenB7. And then on there's going to be an option for a discovery call. And we can just jump on a phone call. I'm very weird. Again, I've said that multiple times, but I actually would prefer people to like text me and us like have a phone call, and then us like have the finagle with like back and forth scheduling. Zoom works and is necessary a lot of the times when we do share screens and so on. But everybody that I work with knows the best way to get a hold of me is to text me. You won't get a hold of me on Friday night or Saturday, as we mentioned, but outside of that time, I'm pretty much a text away. And case in point, there's a guy in Arkansas today, just got a deal, and he wasn't on the schedule, but he texted me, "Hey, Jaren, call me when you have 5 minutes." Didn't even Slack me anything. And I called him when I had 5 minutes after a meeting, and he said, "Hey, I got this really hot lead. I, drove by it, blah, 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 blah." And then I actually was able to use his lead in the next coaching session to run comps and due diligence, and got back to him with an offer like that day. But I would have never seen his Slack message, but because he texted me, I saw it first, and I was able to get back to him right away. So.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. As always, we do these every Thursday, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. If you have not joined our Facebook group, OnlyLandFans, please do that. You can join us at www.onlylandfans.com, and you'll be in the loop with all of the latest happenings in our community. We'd love to continue having this conversation with you. So everyone, have a great week, be great, and we will catch you in the next one. Thanks so much, everyone. Take care.
Awesome, guys. Later.
If you're interested in hearing from other 6- and 7-figure land flippers about how they've built and run their businesses, then check out my group, OnlyLandFans, where I do a live interview each week inside the group. You can grab that link at the description below. Until then, be great, have a great week, and catch you in the next one.